as my colleagues know, the vast preponderance of our work, including with regard to the Department of Justice, focuses on the period post 1998 forward, and I have been and will continue to be a full participant in that work. So all I will say today is thank you for your testimony today, Director Freeh.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. First, I'm interested in your communications with the White House. When you had a serious problem, whether you thought there were threats, did you go directly to the President, or was there another mechanism you used to communicate with the White House, either in the Clinton administration or the Bush administration, or both, I guess?
Well, I mean, my procedures would normally be to communicate first with the Attorney General. On many occasions, after that communication, we would go to the White House. If it was a national security issue, we would certainly see the National Security Advisor. In the last year that Janet Reno and I served together, we actually had a routine meeting with the National Security Advisor, I'd say probably every 2 or 3 weeks. We had another one with Secretary Albright probably once a month. And the purpose of those meetings was to discuss not just counterintelligence and counterterrorism matters, but even other Department of Justice issues that had national security implications. On some occasions, I would go directly to the National Security Advisor. I did not have an experience in either administration of going directly to the President on a matter.
Okay. One of the questions that may be one of the most important that our Commission is charged with is looking at the intelligence agencies and seeing whether any changes ought to be made. Now, I read our staff statement as an indictment of the FBI for over a long period of time. You know, when I read things like that your 66% of your analysts weren't qualified, that you didn't have the translators necessary to do the job, that you had FISA difficulties, that you had all the information on the fundraising, but you couldn't find a way to use it properly to stop terrorism. And that's without counting, of course, the things that were going on at the same time, Ruby Ridge or Waco or the Wen-Ho Lee case or the Hansen case or the lost laptops and firearms and all the rest. The present director, your successor, has a whole series of reforms that he is trying to put to make the agency work better. You tried reforms. You tried very hard to reform the agency. According to our staff report, those reforms failed. I guess my question to you is, looking at this director's efforts to reform the agency, can those reforms work, or should there be some more fundamental changes to the agency and the way we get our intelligence?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I take exception to your comment that your staff report is an indictment of the FBI. I think your staff report evidences some very good work and some very diligent interviews and a very technical, almost auditing analysis of some of the programs. I think the centerpiece of your executive director's report, as I heard it, came down to resources and legal authorities. So I would ask that you balance what you call an indictment, which I don't agree with at all, with the two primary findings of your staff. One is that there was a lack of resources, and two, there were legal impediments. With respect to your question, I certainly support and applaud the director's efforts. The Patriot Act, the Court of Review, a couple of $1 billion is certainly a big help when we're talking about changes. With respect to the jurisdiction of the FBI, I do not believe that we should establish a separate domestic intelligence agency with respect to counterterrorism. I think that would be a huge mistake for the country for a number of reasons. One, I don't think in the United States we will tolerate very well what in effect is a secret, state secret police. Even with all of the protections and the constitutional entitlements that we would subscribe with. Americans, I don't think, like secret police, and you would in effect be establishing secret police. Secondly, if you look at the models around the world where this has been tried, It hasn't worked very well, in my opinion. The other thing, it would take a long time to integrate. If the Homeland Security Department and 170,000 people to be integrated is going to take a couple of years, standing up a brand new domestic intelligence agency would take a decade, and we would lose very precious time at a very dangerous time for the United States. If you look at some of the analyses of MI5 operations, and you can look at the Bishopgate bombing, you can look at the Docksland bombing, the Matroyan case, I'm sure your staff has looked at that. It's been found to be not very effective. In fact, one of the studies that I know your staff has looked at in the United Kingdom that looked at this actually said the FBI was a preferred model because it breaks down the barriers between enforcement and intelligence. A lot of the good work of this commission has been to identify the barriers that existed and still exist between intelligence and law enforcement. Standing up a separate intelligence agency will just increase those barriers. And if you thought the wall was a big one, that's a fortress, in my view, and will make for a very ineffective counterterrorism program, and I think expose the country to dangers. So I think we ought to have the Department of Justice supervised by the Attorney General, FBI agents who are schooled in the Constitution, who have a transparent operation with respect to oversight by courts as well as by Congress. Give them the tools, give them the legal authority, give them the budget, and they'll do this job very well. It's not very different from looking at organized crime, from looking at counterintelligence, which in my view the Bureau has done exceptionally well for decades. The difficulty with the wall was that the wall that was set up in Janet Reno's guidelines of July 19th were completely appropriate with respect to counterintelligence cases, because counterintelligence cases happen in two dynamics. One, there's an investigation, and then there's either an indictment or an expulsion. Counterterrorism cases are completely different. Because of the threat, there's always an ongoing need to act and to use the intelligence to prevent attacks from taking place. So the wall is not an appropriate one with respect to counterterrorism, and that's been repaired both by the Patriot Act and the Court of Review.
Thank you. Senator Kerrey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Director Freeh, I'll do whatever I can here to make sure I don't call you Director Clark as I ask you these questions. First of all, do you think it was a mistake not to, talking about COBAR now, starting in COBAR in '96, not to have you report directly to the National Security Council and the President on what was going on in that investigation?
Well, I did report through the Attorney General and directly to the National Security Advisor.
Well,
You talking about COBAR?
Right. I mean, Dick
Yes.
Clark and Mr. Steinberg, the deputy at National Security Council, said that there was never any written reports sent by the FBI to the NSC. Is that not true?
Well, if we're talking about the COBAR case, you know,
Well, actually, I begin with COBAR, but all the way through this time period, it seems to me it was a mistake not to have you report directly on what you were learning to the National Security Council or to the President, to let him, because since it was a domestic agency going over to investigate what, as I considered it, an act of war against a U.S. military installation in Saudi Arabia, it seemed to me that there should have been a reporting right back to the National Security Council on what was going on.
okay, but I guess what I'm saying is there was. I mean, Janet Reno and myself together on a very, very regular basis, myself individually on numerous occasions, directly with Sandy Berger, that's all we talked about was the COBAR case.
In an otherwise, I thought, exceptional staff report, the staff, I think, miscorrectly describes the 7 cases that you were involved with, saying that most of those were overseas. In truth, 3 of them were domestic and 4 of them were overseas. World Trade Center number 1, Landmarks Plot number 1, the Millennium, and indeed, if you include the threats against the city of New York during the 2001 trial, there were 4 domestic attacks and or efforts. Did the FBI ever produce an evaluation of the threat to the homeland during this period? to the President? Or was there one requested of you?
There was none requested that I'm aware of. I don't think we ever furnished a national threat report to the President with respect to Homeland Security.
I mean, of all the facts that in this whole process that have just caused scales to fall from my eyes was listening to Betty Ong, flight attendant on Flight 11, talk to the ground and hear the ground surprised by a hijacking. I mean, not only were we not at a high state of alert in our airports, we were at ease. We stacked arms. I mean, we weren't prepared at all. And it's baffling to me why some alert wasn't given to the airlines to alter their preparedness and to go to a much higher state of alert. It seems to me that a lot of things would have changed if that would have happened. And I would respectfully disagree with your assessment of the Williams memo coming out of Phoenix, because I think it had gotten into the works at the absolute highest possible level. At the very least, 19 guys wouldn't have got onto these airplanes with room to spare.
Yeah. Well, Senator, I served on the Gore Commission, as your staff may know, and I thought the leadership, first of all, by the Vice President there, was outstanding. I think the recommendations were outstanding. We spent many, many months writing detailed recommendations that asked for passenger screening, asked for many, many things which were never implemented. The whole purpose and the conclusions of that report, if you read it, was that the airline industry and operations were vulnerable at multi-points with respect to hijackings and terrorist attacks. So I agree with you. There was no...
But I mean, you said that we couldn't have had a declaration of war because public opinion wasn't there. I, by the way, disagree with that. Public opinion wasn't on the side of the Bosnian War or the Iraq War in the beginning either. And the President made a determination in both cases to come to the American people and said there's a crisis. But even absent a declaration of war, why did we let their soldiers into the United States? Because that's what al-Qaeda men were. They were soldiers. They were part of an Islamic army called the Jihad to come into the United States. Why did we let them in the United States?
Well,
why didn't President Clinton and/or President Bush issue an order to change the FISA procedures and other orders to INS, et cetera, to make sure that their soldiers couldn't get in America? Why did we let them in?
Well, again, I think part of my answer is that we weren't fighting a real war. We hadn't declared war on these enemies in the manner that you suggest that would have prevented entry had we taken war measures and put the country and its intelligence and law enforcement agencies on a war footing. The Joint Intelligence Committee, in one of their reports, I think I excerpted the conclusion in my statement, said that neither administration put its intelligence agencies or law enforcement agencies on a war footing. A war footing means we seal borders. A war footing means we detain people that we're suspicious of. A war footing means that we have statutes like the Patriot Act, although with time-set provisions give us new powers. We weren't doing that. Now, whether there was a political will for it or not, I guess we could debate that. But the fact of the matter is we didn't do it. And we were using grand jury subpoenas and arrest warrants to fight an enemy that was using missiles and suicide boats to attack our warships.